As a music producer, if I had to start over from scratch with zero experience, this is exactly what I would do to start making professional sounding music today. And this is hands down the fastest and surefire way to make sure this happens for yourself as well. I built a checklist that you can download and follow along with, and this guide works so well, I'm going to use it to make a song at the end of this video, just to prove how well it works. Yeah, that sounds sick. But first, let's download the checklist so you can follow along. So I left a link to this guide down in the description below. I'm calling it the Producer's Guide, and it's completely free. And once you click on that link, the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to come to File and click Make a Copy. And then you can copy this and make a copy of your own. I suggest the Producer's Guide, and then you can write your name and then the year. And now we have our own brand new copy. So up here it says this guide will help you get a kickstart into music production. Follow along with this YouTube video, which is the one you're watching now. So you can click that and come right back to here. And then make sure you watch this video alongside this guide. So first things first, we have the date. It's nice to have the date because if you want to make future copies of this in the future, you can keep the old copy along with the new one. So that way it's like, this is what I was doing in 2023. This is what I was doing in 2024, and so on and so forth. So then the first thing here is we have genre, and we want to pick 2 genres. A lot of people want you to pick one genre and stick with it. And then some other people say, don't pick a genre at all and go all over the place. I think either of those is awful advice for beginners, because the thing is, you need to have some sort of direction to follow, but you don't just want to be a copycat in the industry and do what everybody else is doing. You want to have your own flair to your music. And I think this is one of the best ways to do that. Pick 2 genres. And the first one is pick a genre that you like listening to. And then the genre 2 is pick a genre that you actually feel comfortable making. And if nothing yet, that's fine. Just pick another genre that you enjoy listening to. So first is one of the genres that I really like listening to would be pop. And then genre 2, one of the genres I'm really comfortable in making is metal or rock. They kind of like interchange for me a lot. Now next here is gear. Now I don't want to talk about gear too much because gear doesn't matter unless you don't have any, and then it's the most important thing that you could get to start making music. But once you have a base level of what you need, then it doesn't really matter after that too much. So we need to make sure that you actually have what you need. And in this guide, I've split it up into 3 different sections: have, need, and want. So we'll start with have. What gear do you currently have? I mean, list everything, even if you don't think it's valuable. If you have a really cheap microphone, or you have some really cheap speakers, or even just some plain old desktop computer speakers, or you have a pair of headphones, even if you don't think they're good for mixing, just write down what you have. So I'm just writing down a basic list of what I have: headphones, monitors, mics, interface, computers, cables, guitars, keyboards. I'm talking instruments, anything music related, write it down here and what you have. So the next section here is need. What gear do you actually need? If you do not have a mic at all, then you're going to want to add it to this list. But if you do have a mic and you still don't think it's good enough, please still do not add it to this list. I don't care if it's a cheap $50 microphone. If you have a mic at all, do not add it to the need list. We'll get to the wants in a minute. Now, this is going to be somewhat genre specific because for me, I make a lot of metal and rock. That requires a guitar. But if you're somebody who makes hip hop or even pop, you might not actually need a guitar. You could use guitar samples even if you want that guitar sound in there. Gear is going to be specific to you. But across the board, everybody's going to need some sort of computer, some sort of microphone, a way to connect their microphone to their computer, and some sort of DAW or digital audio workstation. If you do not have those, but you need those, add that to this list. For me, I don't have anything that I need to add to this list. And now the last thing on the gear section is the want. And the reason I'm actually putting this on here is because it helps it get it off our chest so we can just move on. There's a thing called GAS, or gear acquisition syndrome, where I've seen tons of music producers fall into this death trap and never actually make their music. And it's quite sad because they're unbelievably talented. So what gear acquisition syndrome is you need gear to make music. It's necessary. If you don't have any at all, that's going to be the first thing that you're going to need to get. But after a certain point, it doesn't matter anymore. Meaning, if you have a microphone, move on. What happens is a lot of music producers, and I've seen this a lot, they will focus on the microphone that they have and focus on the microphone that they want, and then they will spend hours and hours and hours researching new microphones and looking at all this stuff that they don't have and thinking that that's what's holding them back. And that's not the case. Sometimes it gets so bad that the love of new gear exceeds the love of making music, and we do not want to be there at all. Look, I really enjoy my tools, but I do not like my tools more than I like making music. I can make music with any tools you throw at me because I like making music more than the tools that I'm using. Be careful of this. It can get very dangerous. So I have an entire wants section of this guide just to get it off your chest so you can move on. Whenever you have some extra money, you can always go back and take a look at the want list and see what's on that list and then purchase it if you desire. But do not let the desire of getting more gear exceed the desire of making great music. Those two things are separate and should stay separate. Some of my wants are a Sony C800, a U87, a new PC, real drums for the studio instead of just using my E-kit all the time, and other things like that. These are wants. I don't need them to make better sounding music. These are just things that I would like to have and would enjoy having. But now that it's off my chest, I can move on to the next part of this process. And remember, at the end of this video, I'm gonna go through this entire guide and use it to make a song. So stick around for that. Next is sound selection. And I've split sound selection into 3 different sections here. Sound selection is extremely important. I cannot stress this enough. It matters more than just about everything else besides actually writing the music. It matters more than mixing, it matters more than mastering, it matters more than the gear you use. Sound selection is key. Listen to the before and after of the drum mix on this track. Now listen to the before and after in the context of the whole track. The after sounded way better, am I right? Well, this might shock you, but I only changed one thing. I changed the sounds I was using. I actually had the identical mixing and mastering chain on both of those drums. I just changed the samples that I was using. Sounds are extremely important, and this is why it's called sound selection. You need to select the sounds for your genre. And so I've split sound selection into 3 different sections. First, we want to find sound libraries in the style of our 2 selected genres. Sound libraries are things like contact libraries and things that you can play on a keyboard. They're not one-shot samples or loops, they're actually libraries that you can play and almost perform on your keyboard. So for me, a great pack would be Get Good Drums P5. For metal, Labs by Spitfire Audio has some great free libraries. Get Good Drums Nolly Bass is great for metal. And so I have some great metal and rock stuff from Get Good Drums, and then I also have some great pop stuff in my genre 1 from Labs. Labs does some really great stuff for cinematic and pop. Next, I want to find samples and loops in my 2 selected genres. And samples and loops are a bit different than sound libraries. Samples and loops are usually WAV files inside of a folder itself. You could also use trigger TCI samples in here if you wanted to, but just one-shot samples or loops is where you're going to want to add this to. So first, I'm going to mention Splice. There's tons of stuff on Splice, especially if you're in the pop and the hip-hop niche. And then I'm also going to check out Cybermetal by Drumforge, which is a production loops and samples library from Drumforge. So now I have pop and I have metal, and you can continue on. Now the third one is synths and amp sims, if applicable. I'm going to need to use amp simulators or real amps if I have real amps in the studio, because I make metal music. If I make metal music or rock music or really anything that's guitar heavy and guitar driven, amp sims are sound selection. They're not mixing plugins, they are sound selection plugins. And the same thing goes for synthesizers. If you are using synths like Serum or Anna 2 or Vital or any of these synths, it's very important that you understand the synths that you're using and the synths that you're choosing, because that is sound selection. So for me, I use Serum, I use Anna 2 a lot, and for my amp sims, I'm going to use STL's Will Putney, which is one of my favorite amp sims. So now we're getting somewhere, but there's still a couple things left to do on this guide before I can start making a song for the end of this video. Next is picking a release schedule. It's one thing to dabble in music and to play around, but it's another thing to actually set a consistent goal for yourself. And if you set a goal that you're going to release a certain amount of music in a certain amount of time, what it does is it forces you to actually get stuff done. There's a study done where a ceramics teacher decided to split his class into 2 separate sections. One section of the class had to make the 3 best pots possible, and they had a certain amount of time to do it. The other half of the class had to make 1,000 pots in the same amount of time. They didn't have to be great, they didn't have to look good, they just had to make 1,000 pots in the same amount of time. At the end of that period, the teacher looked at the pots from each section of the class. And to no one's surprise, the class that did the 1,000 pots made the better looking pots than the ones that only had 3 to do. Sometimes you can play with things too much and start to ruin them. Sometimes you just need to move on to the next thing. Your first 100 songs aren't going to sound amazing, and you need to get that out of the way as quickly as possible. I'm not a very good basketball player, but imagine you gave me a basketball and told me to make a 3-point shot. If I made it in the first try, you would say that was luck. I would agree with you. But if you said, hey, stay here all weekend long and you get 10,000 shots to make it happen, at some point in time, you would say, that's just skill. Well, what happened? At what time did luck become skill? Luck slowly turns into skill the more you do something. And if you want to eliminate luck entirely, increase the amount of volume. Volume negates luck. And one of the best ways to do this is to actually set a release date so you're forcing yourself to finish the song and move on. And so pick a release date. It can be once a week, it could be once a month, it could be once a quarter, it could be once every 6 months. Pick something that seems realistic to you, and you don't even have to release it. It could just be for YouTube or SoundCloud, but it needs to be somewhat public. So for here, I'm going to select once a month. I do a lot more than that, especially since I'm working with other artists. But as an example, I'm going to select once a month. And then here, you want to list your accountability partner. Who's making sure that you actually uphold the standard? This is why it's important to make this public and to release it. You're going to have a friend who's going to be waiting for your next song to drop. And if it's been 2 months and you said you drop one every single month, the idea is he or she's going to reach out to you and say, hey, haven't heard a song in a while. What's going on? Trying to keep you accountable. Don't stress out about this, but it's something that really, really helps. Look, I've been there. If I could go back in time and tell my 16-year-old self to just release music and keep releasing it and keep releasing it and quit worrying about spending so much time on the drum mix or spending so much time on the songwriting, just get some stuff done because those first 100 songs are just not going to be great. At least for me, they weren't. So I'm going to select Alex Emmerich as my accountability partner. He's got a great YouTube channel on music production as well. You guys should go check out. I'll leave his link down in the description below as well. And now we're off to the final, but one of the most important pieces of the entire process. Finding advice. The thing is, you need to actually know how to use the tools and things that you have set up for yourself. And if you have no idea what to do, you're going to have no idea where to go next. And one of the biggest problems is not knowing what you don't know. I remember I was trying to figure out what this sound was that I kept hearing in a lot of EDM music. It was like this vocal that was chopped up and placed all around, and it sounded like it was running through a synthesizer. I had no idea what was going on. And I remember Googling, what's the vocal thing sound in EDM? Because I had no idea what a vocal chop was. It's called a vocal chop, but I didn't know what I didn't know. I had no idea how to make it, and I had no idea what it was. There are things you don't know that you don't know right now, whether that be in music production or songwriting or mixing or mastering, and I'm in the same boat. And one of the fastest ways to just pay down the ignorance tax is to find great advice. And so I've split it into 2 separate sections here. One is list 3 YouTube channels you might like, maybe mine. If that's you, I would really appreciate a like and subscribe. It definitely helps this channel out. It helps this guy to get to more people. So for me, the 3 YouTube channels I really enjoy watching is Alex Emmerich's Audio Edges, Nathan Larson makes some great stuff, and so does Venus Theory. Those are just 3 of the YouTube channels that I truly enjoy watching. Now, next up is 3 courses or communities you like to join. And these are aspiring goals. Sometimes these could be free programs, but I highly recommend spending just a little bit of money if you can at some point in time. When you really feel like you're struggling with something, sometimes spending just a little bit of money to actually get into a community that actually is vetted. The problem with free stuff is, first of all, you don't value it nearly as much. If you pay attention, and the more you pay attention. But secondly, it actually creates this barrier of entry to people. Only the people that are truly serious about getting better at music production are going to spend money learning how to do that. If you spend a ton of time in free Facebook groups, you're actually going to see a ton of poor advice all the time. And most of the people in there aren't nearly as serious as you might be. If you're somebody who thinks this is just a hobby and you're not really too serious about it and you don't care that much, fine, then you can join a Facebook group. But if you're watching this far in the video, I feel like you're kind of the person that is super serious about this. So list 3 different courses or communities that you genuinely like to be a part of. Here I've mentioned 10-Day Music Producer, which is my program. I have Producer Accelerator, which is Nathan's program, and Vocal Mixing Bootcamp, which is one of Alex Emmerich's programs from Audio Edges. All 3 of those are great options. But find 3 different courses or communities that you feel like you truly resonate with and you truly want to enroll in, and list them here. So now we're at the end of the guide, and here I have a couple helpful resources down here. Both of these guides are completely free. They are my gift to you. So now that I have everything listed out, now I'm going to make a song using this guide. So first, let's start with some drums. And this is the Get Good P5 library that I had listed in the guide. That sounds sick. Next up is Nolly Bass, which I also had listed in my guide. Now I need some guitars, so I'm going to use the Will Putney amp simulator that I also mentioned in the guide earlier, which sounds like this. Now I want to use the Cyber Metal sample pack that I was talking about earlier. I want to find something cool in there and bring it into this song. I'm going to add some risers from this pack, and even this really cool sounding impact. And then there's this bass thing. That'll sound cool. Now I'm just dragging in some of these glitches here. And then I found this loop on Splice. Now I'm going to use Serum to make this little patch like this. Just kind of following the riff of that guitar. And then from Splice, I just found this super cool impact here. And now everything together sounds like this. Of course, choosing the sounds and choosing the tools is completely different than actually learning how to use the stuff you have. But once you follow this guide, the next step is to actually learn how to use the stuff you have. And one of the most important tools that you have access to in the studio is an EQ. In fact, there's actually 7 mistakes beginners make when using EQ, and I listed them all in this video right here. Inside of that video, I show you the 7 mistakes beginners make when using EQ and how to fix them. So you can go check that video out there. I'll see you in the next one. Now, as always, go create.